This audiobook isn't about arrogance. It's not about pretending to be powerful or acting superior. It's about developing a type of confidence so real, so grounded, so unshakable, that it changes how you walk into a room, how you think about yourself, and how you respond to life's challenges. It's the kind of confidence that makes people take notice, not because you're loud, but because you're solid. In this audiobook, we will break down the mindset, habits, and inner rewiring required to build a level of confidence that feels dangerous, not because it harms others, but because it frees you. We will examine why self-doubt dominates most people's lives, how to rebuild your identity from the inside out, how to control your emotions under pressure, how to master your presence, and how to build discipline so strong that confidence becomes a natural result of who you are. We will talk about silence as a power tool, fear as a compass, and action as the birthplace of self-belief. You'll learn why permission-seeking is the enemy of confidence, how your environment shapes your identity, and how keeping promises to yourself transforms your entire life. By the end of this audiobook, you won't just understand confidence, you'll embody it. You'll walk, speak and think like someone who knows who they are. This is your moment to rise into your strongest self. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Stop asking for permission to live your life. There comes a moment in every person's life when they realize they've been waiting for someone to approve their dream, waiting for someone to say, yes, you're allowed to want that, waiting for the world to open a door that they could have opened themselves years ago. And maybe you've felt that too. The subtle hesitation, the quiet fear of stepping forward without someone's blessing. But confidence begins the day you stop asking for permission and start giving yourself authority over your own life. Think about how much time gets wasted because we're afraid of disapproval. We worry about what people might think, what they might say, how they might judge. We shrink ourselves to fit into expectations no one even remembers setting. You don't need approval to become who you're meant to be. You don't need the audience to clap before you take the stage. Most people are too busy trying to figure out their own lives to be the gatekeeper of yours. And even if they were watching, their opinion doesn't build your future, your decisions do. Confidence grows when you stop waiting and start moving. And sometimes that means taking a step before you feel ready. It means saying yes to yourself, even when the voice in your head whispers doubt. You don't need permission to change careers, start a new habit, walk away from a toxic circle, or pursue the dream that keeps tapping you on the shoulder. You don't need a committee to approve your purpose. You don't need applause. What you need is the courage to act. And let me tell you something important. People respect those who lead their own life. They respect the ones who say, this is my path, and walk it with conviction. You think you need permission, but the truth is, people give more respect to the ones who stop asking for it. When you carry yourself like someone who knows where they're going, others stop questioning and start observing. They might not understand your decision. They might not support it, but deep down they'll feel something powerful, certainty, and certainty is contagious. Look back at your life for a moment. How many opportunities slipped through your fingers because you waited too long? How many bold ideas died in silence because you thought someone else had to approve them? This pattern ends today, because from this moment on, you are the one writing the rules for your life. You are the one deciding what matters. You are the one choosing your direction. And yes, that might feel uncomfortable at first. Freedom always does. But discomfort is the sign of growth, the sign that you're stepping out of the cage you built for yourself. You have one life, one, and if you spend it trying to be liked, trying to be approved, trying to be accepted by every passing face, you'll never live it fully. Confidence comes from choosing your own path and owning that choice. So from now on, catch yourself when you start to look around for approval. Catch yourself when you hesitate. Remind yourself that your life is yours alone. No one else can walk your path. No one else can feel your calling, and no one else can give you permission to rise. Give yourself permission. Today, right now, step forward. Speak your truth. Make the decision that scares you in the best way. This is your life, and it's time you start living it like you know it. Chapter 2. Destroy the self-doubt loop before it destroys you. Self-doubt is one of the most persistent enemies you will ever face. It doesn't shout. It doesn't slam doors. It doesn't announce itself. It whispers quietly, consistently, and at the worst possible moments. It waits until you're about to take a step forward. Then it leans in and says, "Are you sure you can do this?" And if you don't learn how to interrupt that voice, that whisper becomes a loop that repeats every day, every decision, every opportunity. A loop that convinces you to stay small, stay safe, stay hidden. And if you're not careful, that loop can guide your entire life. But here's the truth. You are not born with self-doubt. It's learned. It comes from experiences, mistakes, comparisons, pressure, opinions, and fears that got repeated so often that your mind accepted them as truth. Somewhere along the way, someone made you feel less capable. Somewhere along the way, you internalized a failure as a permanent identity. Somewhere along the way, you decided you weren't enough, and that decision stuck. The good news, anything learned can be unlearned. Destroying self-doubt starts with awareness. You must catch the loop in the moment it appears, and it will appear. When you try something new, when you step outside your comfort zone, when you risk judgment, when you demand more from yourself, self-doubt shows up like an unwanted guest. But instead of letting it take over, pause and recognize it. When the voice says, "What if you fail?" respond with, "And what if I succeed?" When it says, "You're not ready," answer with, "No one ever is." The goal isn't to silence the voice forever. It's to stop believing it. Most people don't realize that self-doubt thrives in uncertainty. When your mind has too much room to imagine negative scenarios, it fills the space with fear. That's why action is so powerful. The moment you take action, any action, you interrupt the loop. Self-doubt hates momentum, because momentum creates clarity. Once you move, once you try, once you start, your brain stops imagining and starts experiencing. And experience builds belief. Think about the times in your life when you surprised yourself, when you did something you didn't think you could do. How did you feel afterward? Stronger, more grounded, more capable. That's because confidence is built through evidence. Each time you push yourself even a little, you collect proof that contradicts the self-doubt. But if you don't push, if you don't try, if you don't move, the loop keeps running unchecked. Another key part of breaking the loop is changing the way you talk to yourself. Your inner dialogue shapes your identity more than anything else. If your inner voice constantly questions you, criticizes you, and predicts failure, then your mind will follow that script. But you can write a new script. You can choose a new tone. You can choose to speak to yourself the way someone who believes in you would speak. That doesn't mean lying to yourself or pretending life is perfect. It means becoming your own ally instead of your own enemy. Tell yourself, "I can figure this out." Tell yourself, "I've handled challenges before. I'll handle this one too." Tell yourself, "I'm capable of more than I think." Simple statements, but repeated consistently, they become a new internal truth. And let's talk about comparison. Nothing feeds self-doubt more than comparing your journey to someone else's highlight reel. Every time you compare, you reinforce the belief that you're behind, that you're not enough, that you're missing something. But comparison is a lie. It ignores your progress, your growth, your potential. It blinds you to your own strengths. The only person you need to compete with is the version of you from yesterday. That's it. If you're improving, you're succeeding. Self-doubt also grows in isolation. When you keep your fears and dreams locked inside your head, they become heavier. But when you talk about them with someone you trust, the weight lifts. Sometimes a single conversation can break the loop, because it reminds you that you're not alone, that your thoughts aren't facts, and that your potential is real. Finally, understand this. Self-doubt never fully disappears. Even the most confident people feel it. The difference is how they respond. They don't let it stop them. They don't give it power. They move anyway. They act despite uncertainty. They trust themselves before they have all the answers. And that's what you must learn to do. Act anyway. Self-doubt is not a sign that you're weak. It's a sign that you're growing, stretching, reaching, and growth always feels uncomfortable. But you have a choice. Let the loop hold you back, or interrupt it, and build a new pattern, one based on courage, clarity, and self-trust. It's time to destroy the loop before it destroys the life you're capable of living. And you start right now, with the next decision you make. Chapter 3. Train your mind to expect victory, not defeat. Every major breakthrough in your life starts in the same place, your expectations. Before you take the first step, before you make the first move, before you speak the first word, your mind has already predicted how things will turn out. And here's the part most people never realize. Your mind is constantly voting for your future long before your actions do. If you expect defeat, your brain prepares you to fail. If you expect victory, your brain prepares you to rise. Confidence is built on the expectation that things will work out, not perfectly, not instantly, but inevitably. Most people live in a constant state of mental rehearsal for failure. They imagine everything that could go wrong. They picture humiliation, rejection, criticism, embarrassment. They walk into opportunities with their shoulders tense and their mind whispering, "Don't mess this up." And when you enter a situation expecting loss, you're already halfway defeated. Your body language changes, your tone changes, your decisions shrink, you hesitate, you second guess, you sabotage your own results, because your mind is acting out the script you handed it. Victory thinking is not delusion. It's a deliberate choice to direct your mind instead of letting fear direct it for you. When you train your mind to expect victory, you're not pretending challenges don't exist. You're deciding that challenges won't stop you. You're deciding that solutions are possible. You're deciding that you're capable. You're deciding that the outcome is worth fighting for. So how do you train your mind to expect victory? You start by examining your internal autopilot. When something new appears in your life, a goal, an opportunity, a conversation, what's your default thought? Do you immediately think of the worst-case scenario? Do you imagine embarrassment? Do you assume you're not qualified? These automatic reactions reveal the beliefs you've built over years of conditioning. And the only way to shift those beliefs is to interrupt the old pattern and install a new one. One of the most powerful tools for this is mental rehearsal. Not the kind where you imagine everything falling apart, but the kind where you imagine yourself succeeding with clarity and intention. Athletes use this. Performers use this. Leaders use this. They rehearse the feeling of winning before they step into the arena. They visualize themselves moving with confidence, speaking with clarity, performing with strength. And the brain responds. It fires the same pathways, builds the same readiness, creates the same sense of capability. Your brain believes what you repeatedly show it. But mental rehearsal alone isn't enough. You must also change the language you use when you think about your goals. The words you choose shape your internal world. Saying "I hope this works out" is weak. Saying "I expect this to work out" is powerful. One keeps you unsure. The other puts you in motion. When you say, "I know I can do this," your mind shifts into solution mode. It starts scanning for strategies, opportunities, and possibilities. Expectation sharpens focus. Focus sharpens performance. Another key part of expecting victory is letting go of old failures. Many people carry their past mistakes like heavy luggage. Every new opportunity feels suffocating because it reminds them of something that went wrong years ago. But your past failures were moments, not identities. They were lessons, not definitions. What defeated you before doesn't have permission to defeat you again, unless you invite it in. Expecting victory means giving yourself permission to start fresh, to see yourself with new eyes, to believe that you're no longer the person who struggled years ago. You've grown, you've learned, you've changed. Let's talk about your environment too. When you surround yourself with people who expect defeat, you subconsciously adopt their mindset. Their worry becomes your worry. Their doubt becomes your doubt. Their fear becomes your fear. But when you're around people who expect to win, people who move boldly, decide quickly, and believe in the possibility of greatness, you rise to their level. Victory thinking is contagious, so is defeat. Choose wisely. And here's something most people overlook. Expecting victory doesn't mean you always win. It simply means you show up like someone prepared to win. You walk differently, you speak differently, you think differently, you respond differently. Even when things go wrong, you recover faster, because your mind stays in solution mode, not panic mode. Confidence doesn't come from perfect results. It comes from expecting good results, and knowing you can handle whatever happens. Expecting victory also requires repetition. You don't change your mental habits overnight. You change them through daily conditioning. Small moments where you choose belief over fear, clarity over confusion, courage over hesitation. You remind yourself, things will work out for me. I can figure this out. I can handle this. It's simple, yes, but life-changing when practiced consistently. And finally, understand this. People gravitate toward those who expect victory. There's something magnetic about someone who walks into a room with calm certainty, someone who believes in their ability to navigate life. That energy draws opportunities, relationships, respect and momentum. When you expect victory, life begins to respond differently, not because the world changes, but because you do. So make this your new standard. No more predicting disaster. No more mentally rehearsing failure. No more expecting things to fall apart. From today forward, expect victory. Expect progress. Expect progress. Expect progress. When your mind believes in the destination, your footsteps naturally follow the path. Train your mind to expect victory, and everything in your life begins to shift in your favor. Chapter 4. Do the hard things first. Confidence loves discipline. If you want to build dangerous, unshakable confidence, you must train yourself to do one thing that most people spend their entire lives avoiding: the hard things. The difficult tasks, the uncomfortable conversations, the disciplined routines, the actions that stretch you. These are the things that separate people who simply wish for confidence from those who actually possess it. Confidence isn't built by talking about what you're going to do one day. Confidence grows every time you choose discipline over comfort, action over hesitation, responsibility over excuses. You've probably experienced this yourself. Think about a day when you tackled a hard task early. Maybe it was a workout, a phone call you'd been avoiding, a project you finally started. How did you feel afterward? There's a shift inside you, a sense of strength, clarity and pride. That energy isn't random, it's the direct result of doing something difficult. The moment you do a hard thing, your brain registers it, and you feel more capable. Do more hard things, feel more capable. Confidence is a byproduct of discipline, but the problem is that most people do the opposite. They avoid the hardest tasks. They delay the uncomfortable ones. They start their day with distractions, scrolling, drifting, procrastinating, and they wonder why they feel unfocused and insecure. When you avoid hard things, even small ones. You train your mind to doubt you. You send a message to yourself that you can't be relied on. And when you can't trust yourself, confidence becomes impossible. Doing the hard things first is not just about productivity, it's about identity. When you consistently act with discipline, you start seeing yourself differently. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries, and start seeing yourself as someone who does. That shift changes everything: how you walk, how you speak, how you show up. And when you know you can rely on yourself, you become unstoppable. Start by identifying the hard things you've been avoiding. There's always something: a goal you haven't started, a habit you haven't built, a truth you haven't faced, a challenge you haven't accepted. Instead of running from these things, move toward them. Take the first step, however small. Action destroys fear. Movement builds clarity. Every time you lean into the difficulty, instead of pulling away from it, you strengthen the muscle of discipline. Let's be clear, discipline isn't about being perfect, it's about being consistent. You don't need to overhaul your entire life in one day. You simply need to build the habit of choosing the important over the easy. If you want more confidence, stop looking for shortcuts and start looking for challenges. Confidence grows when you put yourself in situations that require effort, resilience, and courage. One powerful practice is to build a discipline anchor into your day. This is one solid, non-negotiable action you commit to doing, no matter what. Something slightly uncomfortable that sets the tone for everything else. It could be a morning workout, a cold shower, journaling, reading, or tackling your top priority task the moment you wake up. Why does this work? Because starting your day with discipline creates momentum. It signals to your brain, we do hard things, and once you begin the day with strength, it becomes much easier to continue with strength. Doing the hard things first also forces you to face fear before it grows. The longer you wait to do something uncomfortable, the bigger and heavier it becomes in your mind. But when you approach it early, you strip away its power, you turn fear into something manageable, and once you do that enough times, you begin to develop a new belief. I can handle anything. That is dangerous confidence. And here's something else. Discipline creates freedom. People think discipline traps you, restricts you, or makes life rigid, but the opposite is true. When you live without discipline, you're controlled by impulses, distractions, emotions, and other people's demands. When you build discipline, you control your time, your choices, your progress. You gain freedom because you're no longer pulled in every direction. You move with purpose. The people you admire, the ones who seem confident, composed, strong, they aren't magical. They're disciplined. They've learned to push through discomfort. They do the work even when they don't feel like it. They've built trust with themselves through repetition. And that trust radiates as confidence. So ask yourself, what hard thing have you been avoiding? What task? What habit? What decision? What step? That is where your next level of confidence is hiding. Move toward it. Do it sooner than later. Do it before you feel ready. Do it before you talk yourself out of it. Doing the hard things first will reshape your identity, strengthen your character, and build the kind of confidence that doesn't just show, it lasts. Confidence loves discipline, and discipline starts with one choice: do the hard thing now. Chapter 5. Master your voice, posture, and presence. Confidence is not just something you feel on the inside, it's something you project. And whether you realize it or not, you're communicating long before you speak a single word. Your posture speaks. Your eyes speak. Your tone speaks. Your presence speaks. People read you within seconds, and the message they receive is shaped almost entirely by how you carry yourself. If you want to build dangerous confidence, you must learn to command your presence. Quietly, calmly, naturally. Let's start with your voice. Your voice is one of the most powerful tools you have for influencing how others perceive you and how you perceive yourself. When you speak too quickly, too softly, or with uncertainty, your brain begins to follow that pattern. It starts believing that you're unsure, that you're fragile, that you're easily swayed. But when you slow down your speech, when you articulate your words, when you let silence do some of the talking, something shifts. Your voice becomes grounded, and so do you. This is not about sounding dramatic or rehearsed. It's about speaking from a place of clarity instead of anxiety. When you speak with calm, steady confidence, people listen, not because you're loud, but because you're certain. Now your posture. Posture is often overlooked, but it is one of the fastest ways to change not just how others see you, but how you feel in your own skin. When you stand tall, lift your chest slightly, lengthen your spine, and keep your shoulders relaxed. Your body sends signals to your mind that you are safe, capable, and grounded. When you collapse your posture, slouched shoulders, downward gaze, closed arms, you signal fear, hesitation, or insecurity. The body leads the mind more often than the mind leads the body. Adjust your posture, and you adjust your internal state. And when your internal state changes, your confidence rises. Presence is the combination of your voice, your posture, and your energy. Presence is the unspoken message you give to the world. I am here, and I belong here. Think about the last time someone walked into a room and immediately drew your attention. They didn't need to be flashy. They didn't need to be loud. They carried themselves with quiet certainty. Their energy filled the space without forcing itself on anyone. That is presence. And the beautiful thing is, presence is not reserved for special people. It's a skill you can cultivate. One way to build presence is by mastering stillness. Confident people are not in a rush. They don't fidget unnecessarily. They don't scramble for attention. They don't feel the need to constantly speak. They move with purpose, and they rest with purpose. When you become comfortable with stillness, you project control. People can feel when someone is internally centered. It's calming, it's magnetic, and it's rare. Another element of presence is eye contact. Not staring, not intimidating, just steady, respectful eye contact. When you avoid people's eyes, you signal submission or discomfort. When you hold eye contact, just long enough to show attentiveness, you signal confidence. Again, this is not about performing. It's about aligning your internal certainty with your external behavior. Now let's talk about the energy you carry into interactions. There is a difference between entering a room, hoping to be liked, and entering a room, knowing you're enough. When you walk in with the second mindset, everything changes. Your smile becomes natural, instead of forced. Your gestures become expressive, instead of awkward. Your presence becomes grounded instead of scattered. People are drawn to individuals who radiate calm confidence because it makes them feel safe, inspired, and energized. Here's the truth most people never learn. Your presence is a reflection of how deeply you respect yourself. When you respect yourself, you speak with clarity, you stand with strength, you move with intention. When you don't respect yourself, you shrink, you mumble, you hide. So the real work begins internally. How you talk to yourself, how you treat yourself, how you show up for yourself. Your inner world always leaks outward. Practice this before entering a room. Pause, breathe deeply, stand tall, lift your chin slightly, relax your shoulders, slow your thoughts. Step forward as if you are the calmest, most grounded version of yourself. Do this enough times, and it becomes second nature. Mastering your voice, posture, and presence is not about pretending to be someone you're not. It's about uncovering the strength that has always been inside you and allowing it to appear on the outside. When your internal confidence aligns with your external expression, You become someone others notice, and more importantly, someone you notice, someone you respect, someone who carries real, dangerous confidence. Confidence is communicated long before you speak. So show the world who you are, without saying a word. Chapter 6. Make fear your compass, not your prison. Fear is one of the most misunderstood forces in your life. Most people treat fear as a stop sign, something that tells them to turn around, retreat, stay safe, avoid risk. They feel fear and assume it means danger. They feel fear and assume it means they're not ready. They feel fear and assume it's a message to step back. But fear, when used correctly, is not a prison. It's a compass. It points you directly toward the areas where growth, opportunity, strength, and transformation are waiting for you. Every meaningful step you've ever taken in life involved fear, and every meaningful step ahead of you will too. Here's the truth. Fear isn't there to stop you. Fear is there to alert you that you're entering a territory that matters. If something didn't matter, you wouldn't feel fear. You don't feel fear brushing your teeth or tying your shoes, but you feel fear when you're about to speak up, chase a dream, try something new, or put yourself on the line. That's because those moments carry potential. Potential for change, potential for progress, potential for impact. Fear arises not because you're weak, but because your next level is near. The first step to making fear your compass is to change the meaning you've attached to it. Instead of saying, "I'm afraid, so I should stop," start saying, "I'm afraid, so this must be important." That one shift changes everything. When fear feels like a signal instead of a threat, it loses its power to paralyze you. It becomes something you pay attention to instead of something you run from. And the moment you stop avoiding fear, you start reclaiming control of your life. But let's be honest, fear feels real. It shows up in your chest, your breathing, your stomach. It convinces you that something terrible might happen. It whispers worst-case scenarios with remarkable creativity. So how do you move forward anyway? You break fear down into 3 simple pieces: what you know, what you imagine, and what you can control. Most fear lives in imagination, not reality. The mind is incredibly skilled at magnifying the unknown. It creates stories, exaggerates outcomes, and attaches emotions to things that haven't even happened. When you separate what is real from what is imagined, fear becomes smaller and more manageable. Ask yourself, what do I actually know? What am I assuming? What's the truth here? Often you'll find that the fear is built on a foundation of guesses, what-ifs, and projections rather than facts. Next, focus on what you can control. Fear grows strongest when your mind fixates on uncontrollable elements. Other people's opinions, outcomes you can't predict, timing you can't guarantee. But confidence grows when you focus on your actions, your preparation, your effort, your choices. When you shift your attention to what's within your control, fear becomes quieter because your brain has something solid to stand on. Another powerful practice is to move toward fear in small steps. You don't have to take the biggest leap immediately. You just need to move in the direction you're avoiding. Think of fear as a muscle. You strengthen it by exercising it. If you're afraid of speaking up, start with one small conversation. If you fear starting a new project, begin with 10 minutes. If you fear failure, take one controlled risk. Each small step sends a message to your brain. We can handle this. And the more proof you collect, the more dangerous your confidence becomes. Now here's something important. Fear shows you your boundaries, but your boundaries are not fixed. Most people assume their limits are permanent, but limits are simply the edges of your comfort zone. And the comfort zone is not a wall, it's a soft border. Every time you push it, it expands. Every time you avoid fear, it shrinks. Confidence grows not by staying comfortable, but by expanding what feels comfortable. You must also recognize the difference between real danger and emotional discomfort. Real danger is rare, emotional discomfort is common, and emotional discomfort is where all the growth happens. You might feel afraid of being judged, embarrassed, or misunderstood, but those fears don't threaten your safety. They threaten your ego, and when you allow your ego to dictate your choices, you build a small life. When you move through discomfort, you build a powerful one. Fear can also be your clearest directional guide. If something scares you because it stretches you, challenges you, or exposes your potential, that is exactly where you should go. Your fear highlights the opportunities that will transform you the most. The dreams that scare you are usually the dreams that are meant for you. So from this moment on, start listening to fear differently. If fear says don't, ask why not. If fear says you can't, respond, watch me. If fear says you're not ready, answer, I'll grow into it. Let fear point you toward your next victory, instead of trapping you in your old limitations. Make fear your compass, use it, study it, walk with it. The greatest version of yourself lives on the other side of the fear you've been avoiding. And once you learn to move through fear instead of away from it, confidence stops being something you chase. It becomes who you are. Chapter 7. You write the story you tell yourself every day. Every person carries a story inside their head, an invisible script that shapes how they think, how they act, and what they believe they're capable of. Most people never realize they're living by a story they didn't choose, a story shaped by childhood experiences, past failures, unkind words, comparisons, rejection, and moments they never fully healed from. This story becomes the voice in their head, the limitations they feel, the excuses they cling to, and the version of themselves they assume they must remain. But the truth is simple and powerful. The story you tell yourself is not permanent. It can be rewritten, and the moment you rewrite it, your entire life shifts. Your story influences everything. If your story tells you you're not smart enough, you approach challenges with hesitation. If your story tells you you're not worthy, you shrink in the presence of opportunities. If your story tells you you're unlucky, or behind or broken, you stop trying because you assume nothing will change. But these stories are interpretations, not facts. They're emotional memories masquerading as truth, and the more you repeat them, the more real they feel. So the first step is awareness. Start noticing the story that plays in your mind when you're alone, when you're stressed, when you're disappointed, when you're about to try something new. What does that voice say? Does it build you up or tear you down? Does it encourage you or doubt you? Does it give you strength or steal it? These inner messages reveal the story you've been reinforcing, often without even realizing it. Once you're aware of the story, you can begin to question it. Ask yourself, where did this story come from? Who gave me this belief? Who taught me to think this way? You'll discover that many parts of your story were never yours. Someone else planted them. Someone else projected them. Someone else influenced the way you see yourself. Maybe a teacher made you feel incapable. Maybe a parent was overly critical. Maybe an ex-partner damaged your self-worth. Maybe a failure convinced you that you were doomed to repeat the same mistakes. But none of these experiences define you unless you allow them to. Rewriting your story starts with replacing old beliefs with new truths. Not fantasies, truths, facts, evidence of who you've become, rather than who you once were. You have survived challenges you never expected to face. You have grown through pain you thought would break you. You have learned skills, earned wisdom, and built resilience. You have proof, real proof, that you're stronger than the story you've been telling yourself. But rewriting your story requires repetition. You can't say something empowering once and expect it to erase years of self-doubt. You must feed your mind a new script until your brain accepts it. Tell yourself, I can learn anything I commit to. Tell yourself, I deserve good things because I work for them. Tell yourself, my past does not own me. Tell yourself, I am capable of more than I used to believe. Say it often enough, and your mind begins to shift. And here's something crucial, your story must match your actions. You can't build a new identity while living with old habits. If your story says you're disciplined, your actions must reflect discipline. If your story says you're resilient, your actions must reflect resilience. Identity is reinforced through behavior. Every action is a vote for the type of person you're becoming. The more votes you cast, the stronger your new identity becomes. You also need to surround yourself with environments that reinforce the story you want, not the story you're trying to escape. If you stay around people who doubt themselves, who stay stuck, who settle, who complain, your old story will keep pulling you back. But if you spend time around people who grow, who push themselves, who think bigger, your new story becomes easier to believe. You rise to the standards of the people around you. Another powerful method is to reinterpret your past. Instead of seeing painful experiences as proof of weakness, start seeing them as evidence of strength. Instead of thinking, look what happened to me, think, look what I survived. Instead of thinking, I failed, think, I learned something valuable. Your past is not a chain, it's a classroom. And once you shift how you interpret it, your story becomes empowering instead of limiting. Finally, understand this, rewriting your story is not about becoming someone new. It's about uncovering the stronger, wiser, more powerful version of you that's been there all along. It's about stepping into the identity you were always meant to claim. It's about removing the lies you inherited and replacing them with truths you choose. The story you tell yourself every day either expands your life or shrinks it. You're the author. You always have been. Now it's time to write a story that reflects your potential, your strength, and the person you are becoming. Once you rewrite your story, confidence becomes not just possible, but inevitable. Chapter 8. Build skills that make you valuable everywhere. Confidence becomes dangerous, powerful, grounded, unshakable, when it is backed by real skill, not theories, not wishes, not empty motivation, skills, tangible, transferable abilities that make you useful, capable, and valuable in any environment you walk into. You can speak confidently, carry yourself confidently, even think confidently, but the deepest, most permanent confidence comes from knowing, I can do things, I can solve problems, I can create results. Skill is confidence in motion. Most people try to build confidence from the outside in. They want the mindset without the mastery. They want the belief without the ability. They want the result without the repetition. But confidence built on nothing eventually collapses. Confidence built on skill becomes a lifelong asset. Skills don't disappear when life gets hard. Skills don't fade when someone criticizes you. Skills don't crumble because of fear. Once you build them, they stay with you, and they continue to pay you back for decades. So the question is, what skills make you valuable? The answer depends on your path. But there are universal ones, skills that elevate you in any career, any business, any community, any relationship, communication, emotional intelligence, problem solving, time management, leadership, decision-making, adaptability, conflict resolution. Confidence is not just about knowing who you are, it's about knowing what you can contribute. The world rewards those who bring value, and value comes from skill, but skill building requires a shift in mindset. You must move from I can't do that to I can learn that. Most adults unknowingly decide their learning potential stops at a certain age. They assume they're too old, too late, too busy. They assume others are naturally talented. But skills are rarely natural. They're built through deliberate, consistent practice. Anything you want to learn is learnable if you stop telling yourself the opposite. Let's talk about how skill building fuels confidence. When you learn something new, a language, a technical skill, a craft, a form of communication, you stretch your mind. You prove to yourself that you're capable of growth, and this proof builds confidence. Not surface-level confidence, but rooted confidence. The kind that says, if I can learn one thing, I can learn the next, and the next. Suddenly life stops feeling overwhelming because you know you can acquire the skills you need to face it. The key is to pick skills strategically. Ask yourself, what skills will make me harder to replace? What skills will help me solve problems others avoid? What skills will move me closer to the life I want? The most powerful skills are often the ones people fear learning: public speaking, writing, negotiation, leadership, financial literacy. These are skills that multiply your opportunities. They open doors before you even knock. And here's something important. Skill doesn't grow in comfort. It grows in effort, struggle, and curiosity. You must be willing to look foolish at first. You must be willing to be a beginner. You must be willing to make mistakes. Every expert was once someone who didn't know what they were doing. The difference is that they kept going. They showed up. They practiced. They committed to improvement instead of perfection. You also need to create a system for skill building. Pick one skill and focus on it deeply for a set period. Read books, watch tutorials, take courses, ask mentors, and practice consistently. Don't bounce from skill to skill hoping something sticks. Depth creates mastery. Mastery creates confidence, and confidence creates momentum. Once you master one skill, you'll have the confidence to master the next, with less resistance. Another piece of the puzzle is feedback. Most people avoid feedback because it makes them uncomfortable. But without feedback, improvement becomes slow and uncertain. When you actively seek feedback from mentors, from peers, from experience, you accelerate your growth. Feedback isn't a judgment, it's fuel, it's information, it's a shortcut to becoming better than you were yesterday. And remember this, the world changes quickly. Skills that were valuable 5 years ago may not be valuable today. That's why adaptability is one of the most underrated skills. When you learn how to learn, when you become flexible, curious, and open-minded, you become impossible to outrun. You become someone who evolves, instead of someone who gets left behind. Here's the ultimate truth. Skill makes you powerful. Skill gives you options. Skill gives you independence. Skill makes you someone people rely on, someone who solves problems, someone who steps up. And when you know you have something to offer, when you know you've earned your abilities through effort, the way you move through the world changes. Your confidence stops depending on other people's approval. It becomes internal, earned, solid. So choose your skills wisely, build them patiently, strengthen them consistently, and let every hour of practice transform you into someone who doesn't just feel confident, but someone who deserves to be confident, because dangerous confidence doesn't come from pretending, it comes from becoming. Chapter 9. Stop explaining yourself. Silence is a power tool. One of the biggest confidence leaks in people's lives comes from a habit they don't even realize they've formed, the constant need to explain themselves. They explain their choices, their goals, their boundaries, their dreams, their lifestyle, even their silence. They explain because they want to be understood, liked, accepted, approved. But the moment you over-explain, you hand your power away. You tell the world, my decisions need validation. But they don't. Not anymore. Not when you are building dangerous confidence. Silence is one of the most underestimated tools you will ever have. Silence is not weakness. Silence is not avoidance. Silence is not fear. Silence is clarity. Silence is composure. Silence is strength. When you stop explaining everything, something powerful happens. You stop seeking permission. You stop chasing approval. You stop shaping your life around other people's expectations, and you begin shaping it around your own values, goals, and standards. Let's be clear. There's a difference between communicating and over-explaining. Communicating is healthy. Communicating is necessary. But over-explaining is something entirely different. Over-explaining is a quiet form of insecurity. It's the belief that people won't accept your decisions unless you give them a long, detailed justification. It's the fear of being misunderstood. It's the craving for reassurance. And it drains your energy, weakens your presence, and erodes your confidence. Start paying attention to how often you explain yourself unnecessarily. You'll be surprised. Someone asks why you're focusing on your goals, and you offer a long explanation. Someone questions your decision, and instead of simply stating it, you defend it. Someone makes a comment, and you feel obligated to justify your choices. But here's the truth: you do not owe everyone an explanation. In fact, most people don't need to know why you do what you do. Your life choices are not a public debate, they're your private decisions. When you start saying less, you start signaling something important: self-trust. A confident person doesn't need to convince others because they're already convinced within themselves. They know their reasons. They know their direction. They know their values. And that internal certainty is more powerful than any speech. One of the strongest habits you can build is learning how to end a sentence without a paragraph. You can say, "No." You can say, "That doesn't work for me." You can say, "I've decided on something different." You can say, "I'm focusing on my priorities right now." Notice how short those statements are. Notice how clean they sound. They don't ask for permission. They don't beg for understanding. They simply state the truth. And here's the interesting part: when you stop explaining yourself, you attract more respect. People respect those who communicate clearly and quietly. People respect those who don't scramble to justify their decisions. People respect those who stand on their choices. Over-explaining creates the opposite effect. It makes others question your certainty. It makes your decisions seem shaky. People trust you more when you show them that you trust yourself. Silence is also incredibly powerful in conversations. You don't need to respond immediately to every question. You don't need to fill every quiet moment with words. You don't need to react emotionally when someone challenges you. A pause can be stronger than a speech. A calm breath can be louder than an argument. Silence gives you space to think, to choose your words, to stay in control. It also makes people listen more closely when you finally do speak. Another reason silence is powerful is because it protects your energy. The more you talk, the more you reveal. The more you reveal, the more you open yourself to opinions, criticism, misunderstanding and noise. Not everyone needs access to your plans, your dreams, your fears, your emotions. Confidence sometimes means keeping things private, not out of secrecy, but out of sovereignty. Your goals grow better in quiet. Your progress grows faster in silence. Your transformation grows stronger when you're not explaining it to the world. But let's address something important. Learning to stop explaining yourself is uncomfortable at first. You'll feel rude. You'll feel guilty. You'll feel like you're disappointing people. That's normal. That's just your old patterns trying to pull you back into people-pleasing. But confidence requires new patterns. Confidence requires boundaries. Confidence requires you to choose your voice instead of the noise around you. Start with small moments. Shorten your explanations. Pause instead of rambling. Let your decisions stand on their own. And when someone pushes for more than you want to give, remember their need for an explanation does not create an obligation for you to give one. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is presence. Silence is certainty. Silence is mastery. When you learn to use silence instead of over-explanation, you elevate your entire identity. You move differently. You speak differently. And the world responds to you differently. When you no longer explain everything, you stop living for others and start living for yourself. And that is where true dangerous confidence begins. Chapter 10. Choose environments that force you to grow. Confidence doesn't grow in just any environment. It grows in the right environment. One that challenges you, stretches you, pushes you, and demands more from you than you're used to giving. Your environment is not just the physical space you live in, it's the people you interact with, the habits you're surrounded by, the energy you absorb, the standards you're exposed to, and the expectations that influence your decisions. Most people underestimate how powerful environment truly is, but your environment can either elevate you into your strongest self or quietly sabotage your potential for years. Think about it. The people you spend time with shape your beliefs. If you're surrounded by people who complain constantly, your mind absorbs that negativity. If you're surrounded by people who never take risks, you unconsciously adopt their fears. If you're surrounded by people who settle, you eventually settle too, not because you want to, but because humans adapt. We match the energy around us. We mirror the behaviors we see. We internalize the standards of the group. Without noticing it, your environment becomes your identity. That's why choosing your environment intentionally is one of the greatest acts of self-respect. If you want to grow, you can't stay in places that reward comfort. If you want confidence, you can't stay somewhere that feeds your insecurity. If you want strength, you can't stay surrounded by weakness. Growth requires pressure, healthy pressure, the kind that makes you rise instead of shrink. You need environments that challenge your thinking. People who ask better questions instead of repeating the same complaints. Mentors who push you to stretch instead of keeping you where you are. Friends who talk about ideas, progress, goals, opportunities, not gossip, drama, and limitations. These are the environments where confidence is built, because they force you to evolve. Notice something important. Being around people who are better than you doesn't diminish your confidence, it strengthens it. Too many people avoid high-performing environments because they don't want to feel behind. But standing next to someone who's more skilled, more disciplined, or more experienced is one of the best things you can do for yourself. Their standard becomes your standard. Their mindset influences your mindset. Their habits challenge your habits. Growth is contagious when you place yourself around people who are actively growing. On the other hand, staying in an environment where you are the most driven, the most disciplined, the most ambitious, can harm you without you realizing it. If you're always the strongest person in the room, you're not in a room, you're in a cage. You become stagnant because there's no one pushing you higher. You become complacent because there's no one challenging your limits. You become overly comfortable because nothing around you requires evolution. Confidence built in comfort is artificial. Confidence built in challenge is real. Your physical environment matters too. The space you live in, the clutter you tolerate, the atmosphere around you, all of it affects your focus, your energy, and your productivity. A chaotic environment leads to a chaotic mind. A messy environment creates a messy internal world. When your space is organized and intentional, your thoughts become clearer. When your environment supports your goals, your habits become easier to maintain. Even the digital environments you occupy matter. What you consume online, videos, conversations, content, opinions, shapes your thinking more than you realize. If your digital world is filled with negativity, comparison, distractions and noise, your confidence will erode. But if you curate your digital space with learning, inspiration, knowledge, and growth, you feed your mind with strength instead of fear. Choosing environments that force you to grow also means leaving environments that keep you small, and this is not easy. Walking away from familiar places, familiar people, familiar routines feels uncomfortable, but familiarity is not the same as support. Familiarity can be a trap. Sometimes the bravest move you can make is stepping away from what you've outgrown, not because you're better than anyone else, but because you're becoming someone else. You don't need to cut everyone out. You don't need to burn bridges. You simply need to rise, and anyone meant to grow with you will rise too. Anyone who doesn't will fall away naturally. Growth is the filter that reveals who belongs in your next chapter. To build dangerous confidence, you must surround yourself with environments that feed your strength, not your insecurity. Environments that demand your best, not your average. Environments that inspire you to think bigger, act braver, and become someone you respect. Look around your life and ask yourself one question. Does this environment grow me or shrink me? Your answer will reveal everything. And once you choose environments that force you to grow, your confidence will evolve into something powerful, something deep, something that cannot be shaken by anyone or anything. Chapter 11. Become a person who keeps promises to yourself first. If you want to build dangerous confidence, the kind that isn't shaken by criticism, failure, or uncertainty, you must master one fundamental skill: keeping promises to yourself. Not occasionally, not when it's convenient. Consistently, quietly, daily. Because confidence is not built from external achievements, it's built from internal agreements. It's built from knowing, deep in your bones, when I say I will do something, I do it. Most people break promises to themselves without even noticing. They say they'll wake up early, and hit snooze. They say they'll start the project, and delay. They say they'll break the habit, and repeat it. And each broken promise creates a small crack in their self-trust. One crack doesn't destroy you, but over time, those cracks become fractures, and fractures become identity. Before you know it, you start believing you're inconsistent, unmotivated, undisciplined, not because you are, but because you trained yourself to think so, by repeatedly proving it through small broken commitments. Self-trust is confidence's foundation. Without it, no affirmation works, no motivational speech works, no strategy works. Because you can't believe in yourself if you don't trust yourself. Keeping promises to yourself is how you rebuild that trust. And you rebuild it not through grand declarations, but through small daily acts of discipline, micro-promises, tiny commitments. They may seem insignificant, but they are powerful because they reshape your identity, one decision at a time. Here's the first step. Stop making promises you don't intend to keep. Stop telling yourself you'll change everything overnight. Stop announcing big goals without preparing for small actions. Instead, build the habit of making fewer promises, but keeping all of them. Say less, do more, and let the actions speak on your behalf. Start with something small, something so simple your brain cannot resist it. 5 minutes of reading, 10 minutes of walking, 1 page of writing, 1 glass of water, first thing in the morning. Something that reinforces the message, I follow through. Once you've shown consistency at the smallest level, confidence strengthens, and that new identity becomes the foundation for bigger promises and bigger results. The second step is understanding that self-respect grows each time you act in alignment with your values. When you say you want to be healthier, and you make a healthy choice, you grow. When you say you want to be more focused, and you limit distractions, you grow. When you say you want to be disciplined, and you do the task, even when you don't feel like it, you grow. Your actions are always telling a story about who you are becoming. When your actions contradict your words, your mind becomes confused. But when your actions reflect your words, your mind becomes confident. There will be days when you don't feel like keeping your promises. Days when you're tired, stressed, overwhelmed, unmotivated. Those are the days that matter the most. Because anyone can keep a promise when they're excited, but only a strong person keeps a promise when they're tired. Only a committed person keeps a promise when they're stressed. Only a growing person keeps a promise when the feeling is gone. And each time you do, you tell your mind something incredibly powerful. My feelings are not the leader of my life. I am. Another important part of keeping promises to yourself is forgiveness, not the type that excuses repeated inaction, but the kind that allows you to reset without shame. If you break a promise, don't spiral into guilt or self-criticism. That only weakens you further. Acknowledge it. Learn from it. Then recommit with quiet determination. Self-trust is not perfection. It's progression. It's the willingness to return to the path quickly, instead of giving up entirely. You must also eliminate the habit of making promises based on emotion. High motivation creates unrealistic promises. Low motivation creates zero promises. You need structure, not mood swings. Set clear commitments at a neutral moment, when your mind is calm and grounded, not excited or discouraged. That's when you make the best agreements with yourself. And here's something many people overlook. Keeping promises to yourself automatically changes how others see you. When you trust yourself, you move differently, you speak differently, you walk into rooms differently. People feel your certainty, they notice your consistency. They learn that your word means something, not just to them, but to you. That kind of reliability earns respect without you asking for it. It makes you magnetic, without you trying. Confidence becomes visible, not because you're pretending, but because you're aligned. Keeping promises to yourself is how you build a reputation with the most important person you will ever meet, you. When you trust yourself, the world has no choice but to follow that example. And when you consistently honor your commitments, even the small ones, you become someone impossible to break, impossible to sway, impossible to doubt. Dangerous confidence starts with this simple truth. If you say it, you do it. Master that, and you become unstoppable. Chapter 12. Learn the art of emotional control under pressure. Confidence isn't built when life is calm. It's built when life applies pressure. It's built in the moments when emotions rise, when things go wrong, when people test your patience, when fear tries to take over, when uncertainty clouds your judgment. Anyone can feel confident when everything is smooth, but dangerous confidence, the kind that makes people trust you, follow you, respect you, comes from your ability to stay grounded when the world around you feels unstable. Emotional control is not about suppressing your feelings, it's about directing them. It's about remaining centered instead of reactive. It's about choosing your response, instead of allowing impulses to choose for you. Pressure reveals who you truly are. It exposes your tendencies, your patterns, your fears, your wounds. If you lose yourself the moment emotions rise, confidence disappears. You say things you don't mean. You make decisions you regret. You act from panic instead of clarity. And afterward you feel weaker, not stronger. Emotional control is the ability to stay connected to your strongest self, even when your emotions try to drag you into old habits. It's a skill, and like any skill, it can be trained. The first step is awareness. You cannot control emotions you do not recognize. Start noticing what triggers you. Is it criticism, uncertainty, feeling ignored, losing control, being challenged? Everyone has emotional patterns, moments where the mind gets hijacked by old beliefs or insecurities. When you understand your triggers, you gain the power to pause, and that pause is everything. That pause is the difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is automatic. Responding is intentional. The second step is mastering your breathing. It sounds simple, but it's one of the most powerful tools you have. When pressure rises, your breathing becomes shallow. Your chest tightens. Your body enters survival mode. But when you slow down your breath, you interrupt that pattern. You tell your nervous system, I am safe, I am present, I am in control. A calm breath resets your mind. It creates space between the emotion and the action. In that space your confidence grows. The third step is reframing. Most emotional spirals begin with interpretation, not reality. You assume something negative. You exaggerate a threat. You take things personally. You jump to conclusions. But when you pause and reframe the situation, you regain perspective. Ask yourself, what else could this mean? What is the actual problem here? What is within my control? Will this matter next week, next month, next year? Perspective breaks emotional intensity. It shifts your focus from panic to clarity. Emotional control also requires learning to detach from the need to react immediately. Not every comment needs a comeback. Not every message needs a reply. Not every disagreement needs a fight. Not every emotion needs expression. Sometimes the strongest move is no move. Sometimes the most powerful response is choosing not to respond at all, at least not yet. Silence allows you to collect yourself. It allows you to think clearly. It protects your dignity. And it shows others that you're led by principle, not by impulse. Another part of emotional control is understanding the difference between feeling an emotion and becoming the emotion. You can feel angry without becoming an angry person. You can feel fear without becoming fearful. You can feel insecure without behaving insecurely. You can feel overwhelmed without collapsing. Emotions are visitors. They arrive, they stay for a moment, and they leave. But if you attach your identity to them, they take over your behavior. Confidence comes from realizing, my emotions are real, but they are not the leader. You also need to train yourself to speak calmly under pressure. When your voice stays steady, your mind stays steady. When your tone stays grounded, your confidence becomes contagious. People trust those who remain composed. Even if you're unsure, even if you're figuring it out, your calmness itself becomes a source of strength. Leaders aren't the loudest, they are the most emotionally stable. And let's address something important. Emotional control does not mean emotional numbness. You don't become a stone. You don't suppress everything. You don't pretend to be unaffected. Emotional control means you acknowledge your feelings without letting them dictate your behavior. You can experience disappointment and still move with discipline. You can experience fear and still act with courage. You can experience anger and still speak with clarity. You can experience sadness and still hold your dignity. Finally, emotional control is built through practice. You won't master it overnight. You'll slip. You'll react when you wish you had paused. You'll speak too quickly. You'll feel old habits pulling you back. That's normal. Growth comes through repetition, not perfection. Over time, the moments that once triggered you will lose their power. You'll start to notice how calm you remain in situations that used to overwhelm you. That's when you know confidence is becoming part of your identity, not just your intention. Dangerous confidence requires emotional mastery. When you can stay calm in chaos, grounded in uncertainty, steady under pressure, you become the kind of person others rely on. But more importantly, the kind of person you can rely on. And that is one of the greatest forms of power you will ever develop. Chapter 13. Stop being afraid of standing alone. One of the greatest barriers to dangerous confidence is the fear of standing alone. Not the physical kind of loneliness, but the emotional kind. The fear of moving in a direction others don't understand. The fear of wanting something no one around you wants. The fear of outgrowing people you've known for years. The fear of being judged, misunderstood, left behind, or talked about. Humans are wired to seek belonging, but too often, that instinct becomes a cage. You stay where you don't fit, you shrink your ambitions, you silence your voice, and you dim your light, all to avoid the discomfort of standing alone. But here's the truth. Every person who has ever built unshakable confidence has stood alone at some point. It's not a punishment, it's a passage. Standing alone doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It often means something is evolving within you. When you start making better decisions, you naturally drift away from people who thrive on chaos. When you start dreaming bigger, you naturally stop fitting into conversations built on small thinking. When you start valuing your peace, you naturally outgrow people who live in drama. Growth creates distance, and distance can feel scary. But the fear of losing people should never be stronger than the desire to find yourself. Many people cling to the familiar because it feels safe. They stay in circles that no longer inspire them. They maintain friendships that drain them. They tolerate relationships that limit them, not because they enjoy it, but because the alternative feels lonely. But here's what most don't realize. Nothing is lonelier than abandoning yourself just to stay connected to others. The moment you stop being true to who you are, you feel empty, even in a crowded room. Real confidence begins when you choose your own path, even if you have to walk it by yourself for a while. Standing alone teaches you things no group ever will. It teaches you to listen to your intuition. It teaches you to trust your judgment. It teaches you to understand your own voice, without needing it to be echoed by others. When you stand alone, you learn who you really are, when no one's opinions are guiding you, limiting you, or validating you. That level of self-awareness becomes the foundation for confidence that no one can take away from you. The world often celebrates independence, but secretly punishes those who practice it. When you stop participating in negativity, some people will call you distant. When you stop allowing disrespect, some will call you difficult. When you stop explaining yourself, some will call you arrogant. When you stop following the crowd, some will call you strange. But you must remember, their discomfort with your transformation is not your responsibility. People who fear standing alone are often intimidated by those who've learned how to do it. You may feel guilty when you first start choosing yourself. That's normal. You may feel like you're disappointing others. You may feel like you're changing too fast, or leaving people behind. But you're not abandoning anyone. You're simply becoming someone. Growth isn't betrayal. Outgrowing people doesn't mean you think you're better than them. It means you're becoming better for yourself. And anyone truly meant to stay in your life will grow too, or meet you again at a higher level. Standing alone also builds resilience. When you know how to survive without constant approval, you become mentally unbreakable. You stop fearing judgment. You stop fearing rejection. You stop fearing criticism. You stop needing to be understood by everyone. You stop needing validation to move forward. That freedom makes you powerful, because the world cannot manipulate someone who is comfortable being on their own. But let's be clear, standing alone doesn't mean staying alone forever. It's a transition, not a destination. You stand alone long enough to discover who you are, then you attract the people who align with that version of you. You stand alone until you become someone who no longer settles. You stand alone until your energy changes. And once your energy changes, the right people find you naturally. People who respect your path, value your growth, challenge you to rise, and walk beside you without holding you back. If you're in a season where you feel alone right now, don't panic. Don't assume you're off track. You might actually be right where you need to be. Growth requires separation. Transformation requires isolation. Confidence requires identity. And identity is built when no one else is telling you who to be. Standing alone is not a weakness. It is a rite of passage. It is proof that you are willing to choose the difficult path, if it means becoming the strongest version of yourself. And once you learn how to stand alone, you'll never fear being alone again. Because you'll know deep down that you can rely on yourself. And that is the most dangerous confidence of all. Chapter 14. Build an unshakable inner world no one can touch. If you want dangerous confidence, real, lasting, immovable confidence, you must build an inner world so strong that nothing outside of you can break it. Not opinions, not rejection, not failure, not uncertainty, not loneliness, not pressure. Confidence collapses when your emotional stability depends on things you cannot control. But when your center comes from within, when your peace is self-generated, when your identity is not up for negotiation, you become untouchable. Your outer world may shake, but your inner world stands firm. Most people build their identity backwards. They build it on achievements, on relationships, on status, on validation, on appearance, on performance. All of these things are fragile. They can be taken away. They change. They fluctuate. And when your confidence is tied to anything external, you live in constant fear. Fear of losing it. Fear of being judged. Fear of not being enough without it. But inner confidence comes from building a foundation no one else owns. A foundation based on your values, your principles, your character, your discipline, your growth. Your inner world begins with self-knowledge. You must know who you are when everything else is stripped away. Not who you pretend to be, not who people want you to be, not who you feel pressured to be, but who you truly are, at your core. What do you value? What do you stand for? What do you believe in? What kind of person do you want to become? Most people never ask themselves these questions. That's why their identity shifts with every environment, every relationship, every setback. When you don't define yourself internally, the world defines you externally, and the world is inconsistent. To build an unshakable inner world, you must anchor yourself to timeless principles: honesty, integrity, self-respect, growth, discipline, courage, patience. These principles act like internal pillars. When life pushes you, you don't crumble. You bend, adjust, recalibrate, but you don't break. Your principles become your compass. When emotions are loud, they become your structure. When circumstances are chaotic, they become your identity. When everything else feels uncertain. A strong inner world also requires emotional maturity. You must learn how to sit with discomfort instead of escaping it. You must learn how to observe your emotions instead of becoming them. You must learn how to respond with intention instead of reacting impulsively. Emotional maturity protects your confidence because it keeps you in control of your internal state. You stop getting thrown around by every feeling, every thought, every setback. You remain steady. You remain grounded. You remain whole. Another crucial part of building your inner world is developing a relationship with solitude. Not loneliness, solitude. Time alone where you reflect, reset, listen, learn, and reconnect with yourself. Most people fear solitude because they don't like the thoughts that surface when everything else is quiet. But those thoughts are the doorway to self-awareness. They reveal what needs healing, what needs changing, what needs strengthening. When you become comfortable in solitude, you stop depending on noise to distract you. And when you stop depending on noise, you become self-sufficient. Boundaries also play a major role in protecting your inner world. When you set boundaries, you decide what energies enter your life and which ones don't. You stop letting negative people poison your peace. You stop letting demands drain your energy. You stop letting others dictate your emotional state. Boundaries are not walls, they are filters. They keep your inner world clean. They keep your mind focused. They keep your heart protected. Strong boundaries make your inner confidence sustainable. Your inner world also depends on how you speak to yourself. If your internal voice is harsh, critical, judgmental, or fearful, it will weaken you from the inside. But if your internal voice is supportive, encouraging, honest, and strong, you become resilient. You become capable. You become centered. Self-talk is not about pretending everything is perfect. It's about guiding yourself through imperfections with clarity, instead of self-sabotage. And let's talk about the role of purpose. When you have a sense of purpose, something meaningful you're working toward, your inner world becomes more stable. Purpose gives you direction when life feels confusing. Purpose gives you strength when challenges appear. Purpose gives you meaning when setbacks occur. With purpose, your confidence is not based on temporary wins, but on long-term vision, and vision cannot be taken away. Finally, building an unshakable inner world means accepting that you are enough, even as you continue to grow. It means recognizing your worth without needing external validation to confirm it. It means valuing your progress instead of obsessing over perfection. It means trusting yourself even when the path is unclear. Confidence grows when you stop chasing external approval and start trusting your internal wisdom. When your inner world is strong, life no longer intimidates you. Challenges become fuel, setbacks become lessons, criticism becomes irrelevant, pressure becomes a test you know you can pass. Your confidence stops fluctuating with circumstances because it's rooted in something deeper, something permanent. Build your inner world, protect it fiercely, and you will become unshakable. And once you become unshakable, no force outside of you can ever truly touch you again. Chapter 15. Step into the arena. Action is the birthplace of confidence. Confidence is not built by thinking, wishing, planning, or preparing. Those things matter, but they are not the source. Confidence is built in the arena, where you take action, make decisions, face outcomes, learn through experience, and grow through movement. You can read every book, listen to every speech, and gather all the motivation in the world, but nothing changes until you act. Nothing. Because action is where theory becomes ability, where fear becomes courage, where potential becomes proof. And proof is what your confidence has been starving for. Most people wait for confidence before taking action. They wait until they feel ready, until the fear disappears, until the perfect moment arrives. But confidence doesn't come before action, it comes after it. You act first, you feel confident later. That's how it works. If you wait to feel brave before stepping forward, you will wait forever. Real confidence grows every time you do something you weren't sure you could do. Every time you try, every time you begin, every time you risk looking foolish, risk being wrong, risk failing. That willingness to act, despite uncertainty, is what separates those who grow from those who stay stuck. The arena is different for everyone. For some, it's speaking up. For others, it's starting a business, changing careers, setting boundaries, investing in themselves, walking away from what's comfortable, or finally choosing the life they've been avoiding. Your arena is the place where your excuses grow loud, where your fears show up, where your doubts argue with your dreams. But that's exactly why the arena is sacred, because it forces you to confront who you've been and decide who you're going to be. Action doesn't require perfection, it requires movement. One step, one decision, one attempt. The biggest mistake people make is believing that action must be dramatic or life-changing. It doesn't. Small actions compound. Small actions become habits. Small actions lead to clarity. When you take even a tiny step forward, your brain shifts. You begin to see progress, and progress builds belief. That belief fuels the next step, and before you know it, you've built momentum. Confidence loves momentum because momentum keeps you too busy growing to fall back into fear. You must also understand that the arena comes with failure, not optional, inevitable. But failure is not the enemy. Fear of failure is failure. Failure is information. It's feedback. It's refinement. It teaches you what doesn't work so you can discover what does. Every confident person you admire has failed more times than most people have even tried. They are confident not because they avoided failure, but because they survived it. They learned from it. They kept going. They didn't let one outcome become a permanent identity. If you can develop that same relationship with failure, your confidence will transform into something indestructible. The arena also teaches resilience. When you act, you expose yourself to reality, its challenges, its unpredictability, its demands. But you also expose yourself to breakthroughs, to opportunities, to strength you didn't know you had. You learn that you can handle more than you thought. You learn that fear loses power once you face it. You learn that the world is more generous to people who take initiative than to those who wait for approval. Every time you stand in the arena, you expand your capacity, and expanded capacity is the heartbeat of dangerous confidence. Another truth about action, it simplifies life. When you move, you stop overthinking. Overthinking is a byproduct of inaction. When you're not doing anything, your mind fills the space with doubt, fear, and imaginary scenarios. But action creates clarity. When you try something, you immediately know whether it works or doesn't. You gain direction. You gain understanding. The fog lifts. Action turns confusion into progress. And here's something powerful. When you step into the arena, you separate yourself from the crowd. Most people talk, few act. Most dream, few execute. Most wish, few commit. And because action is rare, those who take it stand out. They become leaders. They become examples. They become respected. Not because they're special, but because they're courageous enough to do what others hesitate to do. But let's be honest, taking action consistently requires self-command, discipline, commitment, the ability to do what needs to be done, even when you don't feel like it. That's why practicing small daily actions matters so much. It creates a rhythm of progress, and that rhythm becomes confidence you can rely on, even when motivation fades. Stepping into the arena doesn't guarantee easy success, but it guarantees growth. It guarantees learning. It guarantees strength. And it guarantees that your life will move forward instead of staying stuck in the same cycle of hesitation. Action turns you into someone who backs up their dreams with behavior, not just emotion. At the end of your life, you won't regret the failures. You won't regret the risks. You won't regret the attempts that didn't work out. You'll regret the chances you didn't take, the arenas you never entered, the moments you held back, the opportunities you let pass because fear whispered louder than your courage. So step into the arena, even if you're scared, even if you're unsure, even if you don't feel ready. Step in anyway, because once you do, confidence will meet you there. And the more you show up, the more unstoppable you become. Action is the birthplace of confidence, and your next level begins the moment you decide to move. Conclusion. Confidence is not a gift handed to the lucky. It is built, shaped, sharpened and earned by those who are willing to do the inner and outer work. Throughout this audiobook, you've taken a journey through the mind, the emotions, the habits, and the behaviors that create dangerous confidence. The kind that doesn't crumble under pressure, the kind that doesn't depend on approval, the kind that doesn't vanish when life hits hard. You've learned that confidence isn't about pretending to be strong, it's about becoming strong. It's not about forcing yourself into perfection, it's about trusting yourself in the process. It's not about chasing validation, it's about building an identity so grounded that validation becomes optional. Every chapter has been a step deeper into the truth. You do not become confident by accident. You become confident by intention, by decision, by repetition. Dangerous confidence is created when you stop asking for permission and start authorizing your own life. It grows when you break the self-doubt cycles that have held you back for years. It expands when you train your mind to expect victory instead of defeat. It strengthens when you choose discipline over comfort, courage over fear, presence over insecurity, and purpose over distraction. It becomes unshakable when you build your inner world so solid that nothing external can take it away. And now, everything comes down to one final truth. Confidence is not something you learn once. It is a practice, a lifestyle, a way of moving through the world. Every day you have a choice to fall into old patterns or to rise into your stronger self. Every day you get the chance to choose the thoughts you feed, the habits you repeat, the environments you enter, the boundaries you set, and the promises you keep. Every day you decide whether to stand still or step into the arena. The path to dangerous confidence isn't linear. You will have days of clarity and days of doubt, days of strength and days of hesitation. But the difference now is that you know the truth. Doubt does not disqualify you. Fear does not define you. Mistakes do not break you. Confidence comes from doing the work anyway, from moving anyway, from trying anyway, from becoming anyway. If you take only one message from this audiobook, let it be this: you are capable of far more than you have allowed yourself to believe. There is a stronger, wiser, bolder version of you waiting on the other side of consistency, courage, and self-respect. And the world changes when you step into that version. So move forward now, with clarity, with intention, with discipline, with conviction. Carry yourself like someone who knows their worth. Speak like someone who trusts their voice. Act like someone who backs their own decisions. Build your life in a way that reflects your highest standards. And when doubt whispers, when fear rises, when pressure comes, return to what you've learned here. Return to your center. Return to your power. You don't need anyone's permission to become confident. You never did. Your life is your arena, and you are ready to step in. Your next chapter begins now.